Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 41 of Humanity Rising. Every day since the 22nd of May for 2 hours between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European Time, we've created essentially a common ground for people from literally all over the world. We now have registrations from over 100 countries coming together in one conversation. And that is how we're navigating through the pandemic, how we view the world beyond the pandemic, and how people of goodwill can come together with enhanced effectiveness to ensure that we actually make a difference in the post-pandemic world. Many of our governments have tried to go back to business as usual. They've opened up too soon and the coronavirus rates have gone up. And now the world is slightly in a suspended animation as we go into the summer. How are we going to cope with a virus that seems to be both tenacious and intelligent in its capacity to adapt? Humanity Rising has been convened by Ubiquity University so that we can explore on a day-by-day basis, because we're going to be convening every day for as long as the pandemic lasts, because we want to take into account those world shape-shifting events and integrate our network into what's happening. We've divided programmatically into 3 areas. One is what we call strategies for change. How do we ensure that we make the right decisions as a planetary community to become more sustainable and resilient and healthy and abundant and aligned with natural systems? The second is new mindsets for a new world. How do we begin to imagine the world afresh? And number 3, solutions making a difference. How do we profile with one another the actual practical on-the-ground solutions that are actually making a difference in people's lives and making the world more sustainable? I happened to be in Chartres today. I was in Amsterdam for the first 40 days, and I've come to Chartres today because Ubiquity's Wisdom School has a number of courses that would normally be in Chartres, but because of the pandemic, everything has gone virtual. So if you notice a little bit difference in my background, is because I'm in a beautiful 18th century little pied-à-terre, really close, within 3 minutes of the Cathedral of Chartres. And I just want to note that because the telluric energies here in Chartres, emanating from the earth, who created us, who produced us, have been noted for over 3,500 years by people who've come to this place, that there's a peculiar energetic quality of the feminine. And Chartres Cathedral, sometime I'd love to share the uniqueness and beauty and extraordinary sanctity of this cathedral. But it's located in a very, very powerful spot on the planet. I raise this because our topic today is about the relationship between ancient wisdom, the ancient intuition of the seers and the prophets and the priests and the intuitives, the shamans of deep antiquity, before history, and what modern science is now coming to understand is the reality of how the cosmos is created and how it functions. So when we talk about new mindsets for a new world, which is the program that we're in right now, I can't think of a more profound mindset for humanity to embrace than the realization that what our ancestors intuited about the earth and our oneness with the earth is what the latest research in cosmological physics and quantum theory is coming to understand. If this generation can bring into a synthesis that ancient knowing with scientific modern knowledge, we could generate a new story that could help guide humankind as it traverses now through a pandemic of unprecedented proportions, and enable us to use this crisis as an opportunity to re-envision the world and humanity's place in this new world. I want to now introduce Jane Corbett, who is one of the core members of WholeWorld-View, the organization that is really sponsoring and is convening the panel today, and she will commence our program. I just want to urge people to comment, write whatever you'd like on the chats, the questions in the Q&A box that you'll find at the lower part of your Zoom screen. The panel will be interacting with you, so we want to make this as interactive as possible. And I guess finally, I want to welcome everyone on Awake TV and the Sign Network and IDNCO and Unify and all of our live streaming partners. We're going out to about 15,000 people today. And we're very excited and very grateful for the participation that is building each day as Humanity Rising unfolds. Jane?
Thank you, Jim, for that welcome. I'm sending everybody greetings from Cambridge in the UK, where I'm based today. And although many people know Cambridge as a medieval university, I think there's so much that was there before in terms of our understanding of the feminine and the sacred feminine. And I was very glad to be one of the first 50 women to be admitted to one of the medieval colleges. Amazing to be one of 50 women in amongst 700 other undergraduates. That now feels like history, but at the time it felt really epic and difficult to know how the future might pan out from there. So I'm also part of the WholeWorld-View core team. And in a minute, I'll be very delighted to introduce Judy Kroll, who co-founded it. But I'll just say a word more about what I do. I'm very much in service of a better world for all and a better relationship with nature. And I run leadership development programs and innovation programs on the basis that the first person we lead is ourselves. So it's the deep inner work that we do. And that we have capacities for leading together, for leading collaboratively, which is so needed in these times when we look at the huge global challenges we face, not only with the virus, but as we look at massive economic inequality and exclusion and the challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. So it's my very great honor to welcome everybody, including those who will be listening to the recording later on. And now to introduce Jude, who herself has a fascinating scientific career. She's a cosmologist. She's an author. Amongst many books, she authored The Cosmic Hologram, which she invited me to a launch of in 2017. And that's how our connection first began, along with others who are now part of the Unity community. She's also had a lot of experience in the business community. She's a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and she has done so much to help us understand more about the relationships between leading edge science, consciousness, and the universal traditions, the wisdom traditions that have been handed on to us from past civilizations and cultures. So it's my very, very great pleasure to welcome Jude and also our 5 panelists who I'll introduce more individually as after Jude's presentation. So a very warm welcome and thank you to Kym Pullman, to Judy Kroll, to Martin Pantuantishi, and Wendy Elliot. So what I'm going to do now is to hand over to Jude, and after we've done a short meditation, and Jude will provide an outline of her latest thinking and intuition on WholeWorld-View. Then we'll have some time to hear from the comments that you've posted in the chat room. Then we'll give a second question to and then we'll have a chance for each of the panelists to introduce themselves and offer some thoughts. Then we'll have a moment of silence, some chat responses, and then a second question, which we'll invite the panelists to respond to. So that's the format of the session. So before we begin, I'd like to invite us into a few minutes of silence, just a couple of minutes of silence, as we feel into what's been going on in the world and what's really being called for in these times. And as we feel into the intelligence of our hearts, what our hearts are really telling us about what kind of changes are needed, and in many exciting ways that we can half imagine, what kind of changes are now becoming possible as we come together and collaborate in ways like we're doing through Humanity Rising. So I'm going to go silent for a couple of minutes while we've become really present together, both those live on the recording and those listening to the recording.
Thank you, dear Jane. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone at Humanity Rising, and thank you, dear Jane, for welcoming us in and offering us the peace and the nourishment of the silence. As Jim said, this is an amazing time, tumultuous time, perhaps pivotal time, hopefully transformational time. And it seems to me that we're actually dealing with two pandemics. We're dealing with a pandemic of the COVID-19, which has literally stopped us in our tracks. And we're also dealing with a second pandemic, I think, which is the dis-ease of our collective worldview, our fragmented perspectives of the nature of reality. And it seems that where we're at now in terms of the unsustainability of where we are and the existential threats that face us have come from a journey that we've trod together of a progressive perspective of the solely materialist nature of reality and the illusion or the appearance of separation. And because our beliefs drive our behaviors, because our worldviews literally not just influence, but drive everything that we choose and decide and do, we're at that point, we're at this point of breakdown and potential breakthrough. And as Jim said, and for I think many of us perhaps on this call, we are realizing that the deep wisdom of the ancients and the universal spiritual traditions of the ancients and the indigenous wisdom of our indigenous brothers and sisters that have held the wisdom teachings for us to this point have all told us the same thing. They've told us that the appearance of the world is not its deeper reality, that its deeper reality is not fragmented and separate, but ultimately unified. And so I'm delighted that we're here today as Whole Worldview community to share some of the leading edge science across all scales of existence and many fields of research, which is finally coming to stand alongside and converge with those ancient and universal wisdom teachings to reveal a reality where we can perhaps heal our collective dis-ease, that enables us to value and appreciate that the reality is truly unity and unified and expressed not in uniformity, but in radical and abundant and joyous diversity. And this is a unifying framework that is ancient and now modern, that actually values the sanctity of all existence, the meaning and purpose of all existence. And as Jim said, can naturalize that incredible knowingness, that gnosis of Gaia, a Mother Earth, as a living conscious being in a living conscious universe. So if I can handle the technology, we might be able to share the screen here. Here we go. I'm still a newbie at this, so hopefully we could begin in a few moments. But this is incredible timing actually, because the basis of the information, the evidence that I'm going to share now wasn't available to us even 10 years ago, maybe not even 5 years ago. So the evidence that I'm going to share very briefly today, and we have a lot more of its evidence in terms of videos, in terms of articles, in terms of so much more that Emma's posted to the chat room of our WholeWorld-View.org website. But to very briefly go through this as a foundation and a framework for then our panelists to share their experiences of unity in diversity. So welcome to the Whole World View of Unified Reality. Science and spirituality and wisdom teachings have been on a divergent path now for centuries. Even though in the 20th century, the revolutions of quantum physics and relativity gave us clues that the mechanistic perspective of the world and the separate appearance of the world was not its true reality. But for a further century until now, the elephant in the room, even with those clues from quantum physics and relativity, the elephant in the room has been the nature of consciousness itself. And quantum and relativity theories themselves did not agree. So what we're finding now is the evidence to go to an even more fundamental perspective of the nature of reality, where energy and matter and space and time are emergent phenomena, an appearance of our universe that actually arises and is guided from deeper causative realms of intelligence, and essentially, fundamentally interconnected, a unified reality. So we're moving from hundreds of years of an ever greater perspective of a solely materialistic and separate universe into a universe that exists and evolves as a unified entity within the infinity and eternity of the cosmos. And we begin that journey, and often it's an inner journey of inner discovery, that reality, what we call the outside world, what we call the solidity of the outside world, when we dig deeper and deeper and deeper into its nature, is incredibly ephemeral. And when we dig to the deepest levels, the tiniest, deepest levels of that, what we call reality or physical reality, it's not little billiard balls running around. It's interrelational, relational, dynamic excitations of fields of intelligence. And that intelligence is actually made up not of energy, matter and space-time, although it's expressed as the appearance of those, but literal information, not random data, but meaningful, relational, dynamic patterns of intelligence that is all pervasive, that literally is the stuff of our universe. And beyond this, and this gets incredibly, oh my gosh, but evidence at all scales of existence and many fields of research are showing the reality that although our universe is real, it is not the physical realm we thought it was. It's more a holographic projection of consciousness, of awareness, of meaningful information. So information is reality, but it's not, as I said, raw data or meaningless or randomness. It's meaningful information with that hyphen, showing that it literally informs the formation of reality. Our universe, its cosmic universal intelligence, takes information held like a hologram on its boundary and projects it into the appearance of our universe. The beauty of it all is, for me, even more wonderful and awesome, because our universe began not as a big bang. It wasn't big, and it wasn't born in the chaos, the appearance or chaos of a bang, instead of which it began in an exquisitely ordered and fine-tuned and relational way, that it not only exists and evolves as a unified entity, but it exists to evolve. It has the most extraordinary and innate evolutionary impulse, not only from simplicity, originally just hydrogen, subatomic particles, but eventually over 13.8 billion years to planets and plants and people. So not only from simplicity to complexity, but imbued with innate meaning and purpose. We're each and all of us consciousness, expressed as meaningful information. We literally inform and are informed by not only those close to us, or even Gaia, but our entire universe. And we know this from our latest evidence. We know from two pieces of evidence that have only become available in the last couple of years. One is a cosmological test of the relic radiation left over from very early, the earliest epoch of our universe, that fills all of space. And it's patterned. And it's patterned in exactly the same relational patterning that we find from the scales of subatomic levels to the scales of vast clusters of galaxies and to the entire universe. And also an incredibly important prediction of quantum physics, that our universe is indeed wholly unified, called non-locality, has for the first time in 2018 been shown to a level of 12.2 billion light years from Earth by non-locally connecting photons of light in a lab with starlight from 600 light years away and light from 12.2 billion light years away. That light left that quasar, as it's known, 12.2 billion years ago. We're now seeing all the evidence for our universe being a meaningful and purposeful and unified entity. And such a whole worldview, bringing all of this evidence, reflects ancient wisdom. It reflects the ancient wisdom of ancient India, the Vedic traditions of the Upanishads. It reflects the ancient wisdoms of so many traditions, and it reflects the web of life that indigenous teachings show us and guide us into a lived experience of unity and wholeness. It's truly a cosmology of consciousness that is emerging, a science of love. But how does this relate to each and every one of us? Well, as Jim said, and we all know, we're at a tipping point. We've behaved unsustainably to a point of existential crises that are coming to us, ecological, social, and a crisis of spirit, a crisis of consciousness, a crisis of who are we? So perhaps understanding this whole world view of unity and unified reality, we may be able to come together instead of from this perspective of separation, to literally turn around and come from an understanding of unity expressed in diversity, to consciously co-create a higher possibility for our future together, and so empower transformational change. So this is about us now thinking cosmic, thinking at that scale. And most of us aren't conscious of how we interrelate and how we affect our whole. And yet we do. So as we think cosmic, we can begin to feel global. We can see already through so much of this pandemic situation how fundamentally interconnected we are. The evidence I'm sharing today shows even beyond that, not just interconnection, but literal unity and wholeness. And the appearance of our universe arises from deeper, non-physical, causal realms of informational and intelligence and meaning and purpose. Our universe literally is a great thought rather than a great thing. The patterns that are embodied in it at all scales of existence are the same fractal type patterns, the same relationships, whether the formation of galaxies or the growth of cities, whether something we might call natural or whether we describe it as human-made. The same dynamic, holographic, informational patterns between the power and the frequency of earthquakes and wars are the same. And if we can create a pattern for conflicts that is a consciously driven perspective that drives from separation, our dis-ease of fragmented understanding, then we can co-create a pattern of peace. Just as conflict may be seen as the most natural outcome of a worldview of separation, so peace is the most natural outcome of a worldview of unity and oneness. We find the same dynamic patterns throughout ecosystems and human behaviors. So the more we can learn from Gaia and all her children, the more we can learn from ecosystems, how they are co-creative evolutionary partners, where each has a place, each relates to the other. A healthy ecosystem is incredibly diverse. We can learn so much from Mother Earth, from Gaia. So, you know, what information are each and all of us contributing to the whole? Because our choices, as this understanding shows, as ancient wisdom has told us, that universal wisdom teachings has told us, that indigenous wisdom teachings have told us, we each affect everything and are affected by everything. Everything is in reciprocal relationship. The South American shamans call it Aini. It's much deeper than a tit for tat, I'll serve you and you serve me. It's a deeper realization that all of us are diverse expressions of an ultimate oneness. So as microcosmic co-creators of our universe's reality, we're much more powerful than we think if we actually can turn around from this illusion of separation to remember oneness, to remember unity and diversity. Instead of fearing diversity, we can celebrate it. We can realize the incredible diversity of a universe where every leaf on every tree is different, where everything is connected through a forest, through a mycelium network, through which everything interrelates and can learn together and grow together and thrive together and evolve together. We can realize that we're much more powerful than we think we are. And what this is saying to us is that mind and consciousness are not something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. So as we think cosmic, we can remember and understand the unified nature of reality and a universe that exists to evolve. When we feel cosmic, we can appreciate and take joy in the abundance of diverse relationship and inclusivity, where everyone's voice matters. And then we can act local. We can choose what we think and feel and do in our everyday communities, realizing that whatever small ripples we think we may make, as Jim said, when Humanity Rising was created out of a thought of, let's do something, just how far those ripples go without expectation, without imposition, and without even knowing where they may go to, but just with the intention that they serve the greatest good for all beings, for all time. So now what? What information are each of us giving to the world? Because each and all of us do have choices. The worldview of our collective consciousness is the great attractor for our choices and our actions. And as we come together to co-create an attractor based on wholeness and love instead of separation and fear, we can literally change the world. As we wake up, as Ken Wilber says, and grow up and clean up the traumas of that appearance of separation, the exclusions, the racism, the sexism, the the environmental destruction, we can clean up and we can show up. And as we show up, we can link up and we can lift up. So on that, thank you, everyone. And Emma, I'm hoping there may be some questions or some thoughts coming out of the chat room, or we've got a few minutes to respond and share those.
Hi, Jude. Yes, we have had some questions, and thank you, everyone, for your comments and enthusiasm. So one question is, so is Gaia a hologram?
Yes, the entirety of our universe is a hologram. And we know that I'm not going to go full nerd here, but we know that originally from research into black holes and their event horizons and their event horizons and the information. But cosmologists now taken that to the whole of our universe. I think the key thing is, though, the hologram is just the simplest way in which cosmic consciousness can co-create what we call a universe. It doesn't mean that it's any less real. The only thing that isn't real is its appearance of separation. That is an illusion. Our universe is real, and it exists and evolves as a cosmic hologram. And we are, in that sense, as indeed Gaia is, all part of that holographic reality.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jude. Something, and a question has just come in actually, which was linked into conversations we've been having today, and another question earlier in the chat. What advice would you have for government leaders in the context of climate change and climate resilience?
I don't think it's just for government leaders. My sense is that a few years ago, I was speaking at a conference in Gilleleje in Denmark, and it was a conference about the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals that had recently, before, had been signed off at the United Nations, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, signed off by 193 nations. And I was asked, what did I think of them? And I said, I think they're amazing. But for me, they are responses to the dysfunctional behaviours that arise, that are themselves the symptoms of our collective dis-ease of separation. And people have worked really hard since then to try and take forward the Sustainable Development Goals. But if we're coming from a perspective of separation, and they are the responses, they're like the medicines to try and help the symptoms of that dis-ease, they'll never be implemented. So it's not just governments, it's all of us. Unless we all come together to link up and lift up and start to not only just understand unity, awareness, but also to experience wholeness within ourselves. And that's often very much an inner journey. When we can both understand and experience that oneness, we can start to make different choices, whether we're in government, whether we're leaders of organizations, as many of our panelists are, whether we're educators, whether we're just us, whatever it is, wherever we're at, we can both in our own lives, at local, on that basis of unity, but we can link up and lift up, as so many of us are now, as so many of us through our growing Humanity Rising community and the World Unity Week community. This is an incredible momentum of a movement that is diverse in itself, but which comes from that not just understanding, but experience of unity in diversity.
Wonderful. So I have a question that is about 1,000 years of peace that some sacred texts have proposed, and whether there's been any information about that or any kind of sensing or potential.
Indeed, there has, and certainly the Mayan elders were predicting, and indeed some of the other Indigenous elders were predicting, that from 2012 there would be an ushering. It wouldn't be birthed immediately, and it would still require our choices. It would still call for our choices to make choices that would usher in this incredible emergence of 500, 1,000, whenever it might be, not just years of peace, but a complete transformation in our understanding and our experiencing of ourselves and the nature of reality itself. So this, in a sense, is not going back to those ancient universal wisdom teachings, because we've come a long way since. It's rather like a turn of the spiral, but it's an opportunity for us to serve what the evolutionary leader circle talks of, conscious evolution, the evolution of human consciousness that remembers that we are children of Gaia, that we are all our relations are part of a universe where we are children and we are microcosmic co-creators. We have meaning, we have purpose. We're here at this amazing time. So let's link up and lift up together and move forward together to take a leap into love.
That leads brilliantly into another question we have for you, which is, what is love?
For me, it's interconnectedness. If there's a spectrum, like there is a spectrum of light, for me, love is profound interconnectedness. The opposite for me of love is not hate, it's fear. Because fear, we buy into fear when we buy into that illusion of separation. When we remember love, when we feel love, there is no separation. And whether that's personal love or whether that's transpersonal love, whether it's personal between those of us and our loved ones, or us, including our pets, whether it's us and Gaia, whether it's us and the whole world, that's love. And what is coming forward now is this convergence of science and ancient and universal wisdom teachings into a unified cosmology of a science of love.
Yeah, we're getting loads of really great questions here. So I think one of them, some of the questions can be answered in different places actually, and we can point to those in the chat, but one of them seems quite relevant for this empowering transformation. And I know something that you've been working with. Someone has asked, can the UN goals be reframed to come from and support the unified perspective?
That's such an important and vital question. I'm involved in a group of thought leaders that are coming together to offer this unifying framework within which the SDGs have an alignment, and therefore they can be deepened and nurtured and softened. And there is an amazing initiative coming forward called Codes for a Healthy Earth, which possibly we might talk about in our panel discussion later. But the Codes for a Healthy Earth are essentially a unity-aware response. So each and of themselves, they also talk about ecological well-being and restorative justice and inclusion and so much more. But they overtly and innately arise from this unifying framework of a whole worldview.
Thank you, Jude. I know we have 2 minutes now. We have a question, what do we mean by hologram? So that might seem a fairly sort of fundamental one for some. I know myself, I was unsure of that, what that means and how it relates to our situation.
Okay, well, it might be a bit more answer than we can offer now, but you know, our technologies, our modern technologies, that we created a hologram, a human-made hologram, what, half a century ago, and we do that by taking a beam of light, separating it, and one beam goes forward, and the separated beam, or the split beam, it's not separated, it's split, is bounced off an object, and that object can be anybody. It can be an apple, it can be a human being. And what that split beam is picking up, its light is picking up information about that object. And that information, that light and that information is then combined with the original beam, and the information is then shown as a pattern of ones and zeros on a screen, a two-dimensional flat screen. So that pattern is holding the information that's been gathered from the object. When we then project a beam of light through that two-dimensional screen of information, the appearance of a three-dimensional hologram is created. So the appearance of the original apple or the original person. And that holds, every tiny little pixel of that hologram holds the information of the whole. Now, that's our human holograms, and they're incredibly sophisticated, but our universe does the same by actually consciously, cosmic consciousness, universal consciousness, literally taking information on that two-dimensional boundary of what we call space and projects it as the appearance of a hologram. The difference is that our holograms are kids' toys. Our universe is the cosmic masterclass.
Thank you, Jude. And thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. I'm making a note of them, and the ones that I can point to, the answers I will. And I think now we're passing back to Jane.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Jane.
Well, thank you to you both. And it's always such an honour, Jude, to be working with you and to be co-creating with you. And Emma, it's just amazing the way you handle the chat questions and have done so during World Unity Week last week. And I don't want the panel to feel under any pressure right now, just because Jude's reminded us that we're all microcosmic co-creators of our unified reality. What we're going to do now is move on to the middle section, where we invite the panelists one by one to respond to the question, what attributes and inequalities have you discovered and that you feel we can all foster to experience unity awareness? And how do you embody it in your life and work? And I'll simply say, as we prepare for this, in my experience, it's something that continues to unfold and emerge every day. And there are days when it's easier, some days than others, but it's the most amazing journey. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Kym Pullman. And in her bio, she says she's a citizen of the world, and that just feels so much as if it resonates with the situation we're in on this planet now and the kind of planetary futures that we need to be looking at. Amongst many other things, Kym's an international speaker. She's a bit of a polymath, and she's brilliantly reframed the golden rule that we should treat others as we wish to be treated ourselves, and formulated it as treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated. She's the co-author of a book called Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation, which was published in 2017 and has gone on to attract a lot of attention. And also the co-creator of the Reboot the Future Foundation, which I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about. So over to you, Kym, for 5 minutes or so.
Oh, well, thank you to Jim and Jude and Jane. This is an extremely rich conversation, and the chat and questions are just incredible. I can see we have a very enlightened group listening in. So I, after Jude's amazing presentation, I will just speak very simply and from my heart, just reviewing some of the things that really have taught me how to find this sense of unity around the world. So I was lucky enough to grow up with 7 synonyms for the higher being that we call God. And 4 of them are life, truth, love, and mind. And they're such beautiful and powerful words, very inclusive. And let's focus on mind for a minute, which is about intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, solution finding, rationality, learning, all that stuff. And I grew up praying to see that we are all one mind, tapped into the same source of infinite intelligence. So one mind directs us all, instead of many minds in a conflict. So why would the outcome not be good for everyone? And I love the way Jude has explained this concept of one mind in more scientific terms. In the early 1990s, I was teaching music to 3 to 7-year-olds. I went to an education convention once, and the only thing I remember was a kindergarten teacher who told us about how she was teaching her kindergartners how to meditate. This was in the early 1990s, so quite advanced. I was teaching that age group, so I could hardly imagine teaching meditation to them. She talked about how she saw each child sitting in a circle, having their own identities and their own thoughts. But then as they meditated, their thoughts rose up to a higher and higher level of consciousness in a V shape. And eventually their thoughts would overlap, and finally all of their thoughts would merge into one together in unity. This fit totally with the concept of the one mind that I had grown up with. And then lately, I've been talking a lot about the story of the imaginal cells that are latent in the caterpillar, who emit a common frequency while the caterpillar is decaying inside the cocoon, and there's just huge chaos. So and eventually the caterpillar is fighting against this imaginal cell, which has awakened in this chaos, and is attacking it. Well, the imaginal cell starts emitting a common frequency, and they find each other, collaborate, join together. They become strong, and they are able to outwit the old caterpillar cells. So that's the old way of doing things. And for me in my work, that common frequency is the golden rule, as Jane just explained it. And if we all live the golden rule, we are finding that common frequency, and we unite to form a butterfly, or the new way of doing things, compared to that old way, which was represented by the caterpillar. This common frequency actually reminds me of music. And I'm an amateur cellist and play in various ensembles. So the goal of practicing is really to play together with many voices. Music is a question of physics, very scientific wavelengths. So what we're trying to do is get that all unified so that we're in tune, we're playing together, stopping and starting and all of that. So it reminds me actually of the frequency from these imaginal cells. It doesn't just happen, this sense of unity, we have to work on it. But there are plenty of models to help us get there. So Jude had very quickly mentioned the mycelium network that's underground. It's this new knowledge that scientists have been studying over a few decades. It's this underground system of fungi that connect trees, not only of the same species, but also different ones. And they actually live by the golden rule, by transferring nutrients to each other. And they communicate with each other by sending warning signals to produce toxins in their leaves when they're being attacked by dangerous insects. And the older trees nurture younger ones. It's actually an incredibly beautiful cooperative system. This exists all over the world. So when we cut down trees or rip out plants, we not only destroy the plants, but also all the life that teems underground. This is like the communities that we live in. If we neglect one part of it, everyone suffers at some level. These systems are fragile, and our unity and peace is so fragile, which is why we have to keep working on it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kym. There's a lot that's so beautiful to absorb there. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce Tim Westwell. Just seeing if my screen is coming back on while I do this. And Tim was co-founder of Pukka Herbs, which is an organic and ethically traded herbal tea and supplements organization. And not surprisingly, this comes from his deep passion for nature and desire to contribute to a more positive world. And really this drives all that he does, including being a fellow member of the WholeWorld-View core team. So he not only works now with Pukka Herbs, but his latest project is an organic and regenerative farm in Cornwall, which I'm sure he'll tell us a bit about. And just picking up this theme of frequency that Kym brought in to give us a sort of frequency between each panel speaker, I'm going to repeat the question that we're asking the panel speakers to work with each time one of them begins. So coming again to the question that we're inviting them to reflect on, what attributes and inequalities have you discovered and that you feel we can all foster to experience unity awareness? And how do you embody it in your life and your work? Over to you, Tim.
Jane, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone before. And I'm here in Cornwall by St. Michael's Mount, and it was nice to hear Jim talking about ancient traditions, and I'm going to cover some of that today. St. Michael's Mount is a very special place for me, with the ley line crossing point, which goes from here up to cross sends the south of the UK, and also with an energy line, a ley line through to through Europe and to France, through France, Italy, Greece, and over into Israel. And energy lines and energetics is something that's really fascinated me for some time. And 19 years ago, I looked to change my career really, and I wanted to do something different from what I was doing at the time, and really contribute to a better world really. And through that process, I met an amazing guy called Sebastian Paul, who was a herbalist and had studied Ayurveda for a long time. And he shared with me some of the ancient wisdoms and the knowledge that had been written down in the Vedas, and as Judy said before, writing had been passed on for a long time by mouth, or perhaps by feeling as well, really. And what I really thought was incredible was that this ancient knowledge, we'd kind of lost it in the West, this ability to really reconnect to nature. And I love this aspect of looking at Ayurveda and the importance and the remembrance of the elements of air, space, fire, water, and earth, and how those elements are in us all, and to a greater or lesser extent, but we are all unified in those elements, coexist in every one of us, and everything animate and inanimate. And through that process, life really is about living in balance, with yourself, and living in balance with your local environments and your larger environment, but also with balance with your relationships with each other and the seen and the unseen as well. So 19 years ago, I went on this journey to try and start up a business with a really clear passion or real desire to create a more conscious world by connecting people to the power of plants. And in doing so, connecting people and plants and the planet together to create a bit more harmony and health and happiness. Little did I know that starting from my spare bedroom in my flat in Bristol in England, and Sebastian making the teas in his kitchen, we come to a point 18 years later where we're making about 2 million herbal tea bags a day now at the moment. And that's an incredible journey, unbelievable. And little did I know that the power of herbs could go such a long way around the world. We collect about 170 herbs from 30 countries, and then we distribute the herbs around the world as well. And these are obviously herbs that have been used for thousands of years by many, many people to help them through their life's journeys of ailments, conditions, disease, or disease. And, you know, it's been an incredible journey to think there's, you know, we're still in touch. Nature offers us an abundance of many things. And I think there's around about 18,000 medicinal plants that are listed at the moment. And we're still touching the surface of what nature can bring and can offer us. So, you know, as we grew and developed, I learned a lot about myself. And we mentioned evolving today, and evolving has been quite a bit of my journey, really. It's really finding out about myself while being able to practice and live through bringing the power of herbs into people's lives. So, you know, as we grew and developed, for me, Sebastian and myself just working together, we've grown into about 120, 130 people. What's really been key is how we unify our spirit, we unify our mission, and we keep together really. But as we mentioned previously, you know, unity really begins at home, and home is where the heart is, and unity is where the heart is as well, in so many ways. And through that, we've really, and what I've really been inspired to do is to really help people explore their own journeys for their own personal unity and digging deep into themselves, to discover themselves, much as we discover the outside world, discovering our own inside world as well. So as well as kind of getting to know who you are, and then probably as what we try to do at Pucker and otherwise now, is it's time to be who you are and trust trust who you are. So trust your intuition, trust perhaps the seen and the unseen, and trust the possibilities that can occur as well, and behave as if those possibilities can occur as well. So, you know, as we've grown and developed, and this thing I found out, being a very busy person, as some people tend to be, is that, you know, we start to forget that we're human beings, and we become human doings. We would at Pucker and other places I've been, there's been a lot of human doingness, what I've always tried to do is embark and help remember the wholeness of the human being, really, so that as we are at work or at home, in our private or outside life, we are a whole person, and bits of us can show up at any time, at any moment. But remembering that wholeness, remembering that as we are who we are and being who we are listening to others and how they are, and compassionate to that as well. One of the things as we grew and developed was the possibility of creating a framework from these ancient teachings that could hold our system together, of our movement, our mission together, really, so that everyone could be in coherence, shall I say, of possibilities. And to do that, we went back to the ancient traditions, and we at Pucker, we created what we call these wisdom seeds. These seeds that gave us an understanding and the possibilities of how to behave, taken from ancient traditions. The four wisdom seeds that we developed were truth, respect, purity, and effort. And we worked with our teams and our colleagues to help describe those. So, for example, truth was about being discerning and authentic. Respect was about being self-aware and compassionate. And purity is about being clear-headed and open-hearted. And effort is about being inspiring and purposeful. And that really, those are and still are our guidelines to being able to guide and hold ourselves. If we're having meetings, we're doing inductions, or we're recruiting, or whatever we may be doing, we hold those dear to not values, but guiding points, basically. So
Tim, I wonder if I can do this in a spirit of being rather than doing.
Yes.
But we need to move on, so there's time for
okay.
all of the panelists to speak.
Yeah, so sorry I'll let you go on, if I may, just to say that I thank you for your time. I just wanted to say that really, for me, unity is really about acceptance and love, and that was what I was going to end up at. And sorry to go on too much today, but there we are.
You didn't go on too much at all. There's so much richness still to come out, but maybe we can pick some of that up a little later when we come back to the chat questions. Thank you so much for the brilliant story of Pucker Herbs and all you stand for. So moving now to our third panelist, Judy Kroll. I think what she shares with many of us is a sense there are new possibilities for the evolution of our consciousness, and that she's seeking to act as a midwife for consciousness, for whole systems health, and a whole worldview. And she's working in many places with evolutionary change agents who are working on creating greater connection and wholeness. And along the way, she's published books, she's a speaker, she's a consciousness coach, a mentor, and hosts the Dr. Judy Show, All Things Connected, and she's a founder of Good of the Whole, so there's a lot to share with us. So just to come back again to the question that we're asking all of the panel to speak about, what attributes and inequalities have you discovered and that you feel we can all foster to experience unity awareness? And how do you embody it in your life and work? Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Jim and Jude, and all of the amazing, I'm looking over at the chat, and incredible friends and people here joining us today. Thank you all so much. You know, this question is such an important question as we move into this precipice of change, right where we're at on the planet. So I'm excited to deepen into this topic. And I'm really happy that we've moved from this connection with the sacred to the connection with nature And now I'm going to bring it down into our connection with each other and our connection with ourselves. Because the attributes and inner qualities of unity awareness begin with that experience of wholeness. And at Good of the Whole, we really we've been practicing that experience of wholeness, that experience of unity awareness for 8 years now. We've been holding weekly, what we call the global heart resonance calls. And we've been practicing not only understanding our collective intelligence, of pulling collective intelligence in group dynamics, but learning how to hold that field, that unified field that Jude speaks of, and come into our heart, creating resonance, building coherence in the field with all who are there, and then literally learning to really listen to that unified field of consciousness as it informs and we inform it. And I think that this is a beautiful practice for not only ourselves, moving from that inner work that we're doing, but now coming together in community to really practice creating greater resonance, expanding that coherent field, and then literally bringing voice and that embodied expression to that unified field, really presencing that unified field of consciousness that is unity awareness, that is our wholeness. So just to begin, we come into that experience of wholeness as not only just the mind, like we're talking about shifting our whole worldview, but it comes from that first experience that's embodied. It's like we've learned in meditation, in yoga, in other practices of what that unity awareness feels like viscerally. And now we learn what it feels like with one another when we engage. We're learning, we're practicing, we're in this place of what does it feel like when we both come into that field together and begin co-creating with divine and the nature and one another. What does that experience feel like? And how do we harvest that wisdom? And I'm going to say not the collective wisdom, but that unified wisdom that comes through the collective. So we practice that every Monday. We have a global, you're all welcome to come in. It's something we've done every Monday morning for 8 years. And we also have other opportunities where we begin to practice that. Just as Humanity Rising began doing this summit as a response to COVID, Good of the Whole mentoring stewards began saying, what can we do? And instantly within days of the shutdown, just like Humanity Rising, we created the connection field. We wanted to say, how do we maintain this connection in this time of social distancing? What does that look like? So not only let's stay connected as colleagues, but let's really deepen into our embodied connectedness with all of life, our embodied connectedness of wholeness, like Jude speaks of. It's not that we are connected, it's that we are that consciousness. We are that love. We are that unified field expressed as humans, expressed as individuals in our uniqueness. So what are those practices? Heart resonance, building coherence, and moving that lived experience of wholeness into our work in our lives in many different ways. And so it begins with that experience, that embodiment, that expression, and then we engage from that place. And when we do, I'll summarize by just saying, once we learn how to engage with each other, we begin to learn how to live for the good of the whole. We co-create whole systems health, and we expand that whole world view of what we're speaking of today. So with that, I'll be complete. Jane, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. This is a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Julie. and for, amongst many things that you covered, for reclaiming collective intelligence, so that it's not just a capacity of connected computers, but it's part of our innate human potential. And one of the things can grow from being connected and experiencing being in the unified field together. Beautiful, thank you. So I'm going to now move to Martin. I have a little trouble saying his surname, so correct me if I've got it wrong. Maybe you can get it right. Martin Han Chuji. Like many people, he spanned many worlds and can now speak with that capacity. So he's had a diverse career in marketing and advertising. He's founded companies. He's been chair of numerous boards and committees. He's founded Wisdom in Business and the Inner Peace Conference, Delight Yoga, and the Playing Circle. And his ongoing purpose is creating communities of people and networks of organizations around the common purpose of guiding people towards more conscious living and working. So much the theme that we are working with now as we think about the transformative possibilities beyond the COVID crisis. So Martin, many thanks and welcome to you.
Well, thank you, Jane, for this lovely introduction, and thank you for organizing this as well. Jude, Jim, Emma, Richard, beautiful to hear all this. So, but I'll start quickly because I think we're running a little bit late. But I want to start with a little sentence Jim just said, or Tim just said. Westwell, unity starts at home, and that was also a little bit the circle I had walked. I grew up as quite a normal Dutch guy who loved field hockey and was good in sports. And I went to a university town, a very old university town called Utrecht, and joined this very old fraternity as well, where I was raised and brought up to be quite competitive and a little bit in the Newtonian Darwinian worldview, where there was survival of the fittest. And there were just random particles colliding, and ta-da, here we are. And that was for a long while my worldview as well. So I went into my university, but after a couple of years of also drinking quite a bit, I found myself to be completely different than when I started physically. And I went on a journey. I grabbed my bag and went for a year around the world. And I ended up for 6 months in the Himalayas, where I discovered very small villages of 6 people, which I was walking in between, or 6 houses, and found these cultures that were cultivating God through plant medicines, and they were getting at Shiva through all kinds of beautiful ways of meditation. So I joined some of those families for a while on my journey to become whole. And I returned back, became a lawyer, actually, realized that was not the end game for me. And but still, I was still in that materialistic worldview that you had to succeed and become something. And that theme of becoming something was still an important one. So it made me choose for a Dutch company called Unilever. I think Kym had something to do with that company as well, or at least her husband, Paul Pullman, which made some beautiful transformation in that company. But I joined just wanting to become successful and be something. But I had the luck that my first boss was such a beautiful lady, Louise Duis, and this was 20 years ago. And she said to me after 6 months, I see that you're working quite hard, but why don't you go to this meditation center just outside of Durban? This was in Durban. And this is 20 years. Now everybody gets sent off to a meditation course if you're feeling a little bit of stress. But then in the day, this was quite ballsy move. So I started studying with Mahesh Yogi, a beautiful yogi, in the transcendental meditation movement. And that basically started slowly transforming me, this meditation. I was a very slow student. It took me a long while to really understand what unity consciousness was. So I traveled from Unilever to Heineken to more creative profession as a creative director in several agencies, and had the fortune to be able to sell one of those agencies and make a a little bit of money, and then the question arises, when you found out that that doesn't make you happy or whole, for that matter, what do you do with the rest of your life? And my choosing was to give back in the form of a little yoga school in Amsterdam, together with my dear friend Wessel. And one yoga school became 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and that became a whole new journey, which for me, I was still acquiring knowledge. I was still not whole in a way, even with a yoga school and practicing every day. I was still, and it was only when I got really back home, and here's the quote, "Unity is back home," when I started reading Spinoza, and realized in one of his that mind and matter are always one, and that there's no mind arose out of matter, the materialistic worldview, which I was in, but that it always has been one. And in that point, during those time, I also met Jude, and she was explaining me about the cosmic thought, which was exactly what Spinoza was talking about. So for me, it's been a long journey, actually, through Eastern philosophy, through many countries, to come back home in Amsterdam, where I'm sitting now at the moment, realizing that mind and matter are one. But what does it derive, and what does it teaches you? Well, it taught me that I have to stop searching, and that I'm whole, and I've always been whole. And then one of the great quotes that Spinoza has: when you realize that, then egoism and altruism becomes one, if you're part of the totality. So for me, it was about a journey coming home, realizing that. And well, thank you for hosting this amazing conference, Jane, and being part of this incredible panel.
Thank you so much, Martin, for the honesty with which you've described how your worldview is shaped and evolved, and the deep learning and experiences along the way. So, not because there isn't more we'd love to hear from you, there is, but let's pass on to our 5th panel member, Wendy Elliot. So Wendy will perhaps tell us more about the Flourish values model that she works with. And it comes from a deep acknowledgement of the natural reality of which we're part, that's constantly calling us to wholeness and to love. And her work really emphasizes the sacred nature of human creativity and the potential in this process, and the need for us to work together to create systems that better nurture the developmental needs and the spiritual needs of both children and as adults, because of course we go on learning and developing and evolving every day we're here. So Wendy, just to remind ourselves again of the question that we're asking the panelists to address, it's what attributes and inequalities have you discovered and that you feel we can all foster to experience unity awareness, and how do you embody it in your life and your work? Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, everybody. I was just sitting and feeling, as Jude was speaking, I just felt very touched, actually. It's almost like this is the time I've been waiting for, particularly because both this event, Humanity Rising, was started by First Nations, Indigenous people speaking, and 2 years ago I was at the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto, which was also started by Indigenous speakers. And that sense that this is nothing new. What's extraordinary is how we've allowed ourselves to forget to the degree we have. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I was just thinking what I can bring. My heart always goes really strong when I'm doing these things. But my own journey has been a bit like some of the other speakers. It's been an unusual journey. And in whole periods of it, it hasn't made a lot of sense to me. So one of the most extraordinary aspects of this time now is my personal journey makes complete sense. All the things that I thought I'd left behind or moved on to doing other things, that's everything now, everything I've done, all the language I've used, all the projects that I've learned, nothing has been wasted. It's all coming into one coherent whole. So 30 years ago, I was very engaged in the transpersonal consciousness, spirituality, very embedded in an understanding of wisdom, and particularly ancient and indigenous cultures. I used to run something called the Ouroboros Trust, which looked at ancient and indigenous wisdom and what it could bring to the world. So I had a whole period of time being very embedded in that. And then I had my daughter. I was working as a management consultant at the time. And when I had my daughter, I read one book by Maria Montessori. And it was one of those light bulb moments. I literally remember sitting in bed with the book going, no, why has nobody told me this? Nobody explained this about human development and early childhood. And the reading of that one book changed my life course, because I basically, over the next couple of years, I left one career behind. I became extremely interested in early human development. So one whole aspect of my work from then, and particularly now, is early human development. And I guess now I understand I am trying to prevent the damage. So from pre-birth to 8, I'm particularly interested in literally how to help people understand the shaping of worldviews. That children come in, there is the unity awareness is there. It's when we step into the world of, adults and the cultural world, we start to erode that sense of unity awareness. So the Flourish project was my attempt to show people, and we're hoping to do that globally, where values, beliefs, and behaviors come from. Because you are more than your values, beliefs, and behaviors. So every child that comes into the world shares the same core needs that are common to humanity. So we are one common humanity at the beginning. And prior to that, we experience ourselves as unified. We have to learn that we're not. So a huge part of my work is preventing the damage, optimizing human potential, understanding the shaping of worldviews so that I understand why I am the way I am and why you are, which is a definition of compassion, is really understanding why I am. So compassion for self, others, and the natural world. We call it is the Flourish values model, but we put it out as a triple well-being framework, because you cannot separate the self from the others, and you cannot separate the others from the natural world, where it's one system, one coherent system. So a lot of my work's involved in that. I am now involved in the understanding of spirituality within education settings. So that's a whole other part. And I'm also involved in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, because I feel very strongly that economists need to be part of this conversation. So I'm extremely interested in just the number of conversations that are happening worldwide. But I wanted to answer the specific attributes and qualities, because when I thought about that for myself, this moment of time in particular, my own experience is letting go is huge for me. That's letting go of my previous perceptions of what I thought I was capable of or where my work was going, letting go of what my expectations of success are, and letting go of the boundaries that I thought might have existed. And alongside the letting go is letting come. So in other words, just being open enough to recognize the extraordinary synchronicities and patterns that are emerging. I've never been in such an emergent time, but it seems I have to, my big job is to get my small self out of the way, so I can fully step into being who I am with all my skills and capacities and my unique interests. And I can kind of embody the best of what Wendy is and bring this to the table. And the other two are courage and humility. That I think that courage is, I was very shy as a kid, I still have to force myself to be seen, and humility that, you're one of many. And I was looking at a stat, there have been 107 billion people that have lived in the world. And if you think about the fact that every single one of us has been unique, this is astonishing. So the power of us when we unite is absolutely extraordinary. So we've got 7.8 billion people alive now. We all have choice. The power of this human potential, and I like the idea of to have a positive infection. We saw how fast COVID changed everything. So we could introduce a kind of positive infection that can also shift everything, but don't be constrained by thinking that the old rules apply and the old boundaries apply about what is and isn't possible. Jane,
thank you so much, Wendy. That is beautiful. And thank you so much for reminding us that we come in whole. We come in as our shared humanity, and that we each have this unique potential that we continuously unfold. So I was asked to give us a silent minute to digest before we shifted to the next round, but I think we can go even better than that, not just digest. I think we can have a minute in which we sit with a sense of being truly present and the coherence between us, even though we're in different locations. There's a field that we're forming as we sit here together in this session. So I'm going to go quiet for a minute, and then we'll move on to the last segment of this session. And once again, during that last segment, you'll be invited to continue to contribute chat messages, which Emma will be harvesting later. So let's enjoy sinking into all the connection that happens in this moment of silence. So as we come back into speaking again, what's going to happen for the next 10 minutes or so is that I'm going to offer another question to the panelists and invite any of them in a popcorn style to contribute to their latest thoughts pretty concisely, so that's time for each of the panelists to speak. And we won't do it in a particular order, we'll just see what comes through. So the question is, how do you feel such unity consciousness can empower transformational change in the world? I'll just say that again. How do you feel such unity consciousness can empower transformational change in the world? So I'm wondering which of the panel would like to speak first. And if it goes very quiet, I'm simply going to invite Kym to join us for a minute. Kym, how do you feel unity consciousness can empower transformational change in the world? Can you put your mic on?
Wendy did have her hand up. She would look like she was quite ready to go first.
Thank you for spotting that before I did. So Wendy, shall we call you in?
Oh, you sure? Right, no, I wanted to talk about education actually, because what I'm seeing happening across the world is this literally a huge desire to talk about education systems. So I think Unity Conscious is engaging people throughout the world. So different groups are popping up everywhere. The big challenge is how we unite people. But the other thing that I think is happening is this emergent assistance. I've had weird periods of time where I think about something and someone will email me, or the phone will go and it'll be the person you wanted. I think that's happening if everyone stays open to it. This emergent nature of what you need is there and is already presenting to you. So Jude's attractor, I think, is really at play. I mean, the aspect that I am struggling to work out is how we join up all these dots together. And I know Kym, as Reboot the Future, is running an education conversation, but there are lots of them going on. I was involved in a newspaper, a new form of media that were doing it. So I think that's a very interesting field at the moment.
This is Julie, and I'll just expand on that because it's exciting. We've had lots of comments in the chat about education, and also how the Codes for a Healthy Earth can help in that development. And I just want to presence that. How does Unity Consciousness really shift and transform our world is to really look at that every system and structure on our planet was conceived, built, and functioning in that old paradigm, that old worldview, that consciousness of separation. And that we're waking from, going, oh, wait a minute. And so as we understand ourselves in this unitive wholeness, in this new framework of a whole world view, we're in the process of rebuilding, remodeling every system and structure, including education, healthcare, finance, government. We can go on and on of every system and structure on our planet. And so this unitive consciousness, that experience of unitive consciousness, creates this new worldview. And we can see every system, we see through every system and structure. We see why it's all breaking down. When we truly embody that consciousness, we understand that it's necessary and it's an important part of our evolution now. So we can consciously co-create the new systems and structures, including education. And it does begin with bringing our littles in, bringing those youngins in, and really teaching unity and unity awareness from a younger age. We don't have to wait till we're 30 in meditation and have that aha moment on the mountaintop. We literally can begin really embodying and understanding our unity and that perspective of being one with all of nature, with the earth, with a sacred divine source, and with each other from a very young age. And so it's an important part of our evolution. We're consciously co-creating that. And just presencing one last piece, that literally this unitive awareness and rebuilding, remodeling all these systems and structures is happening. This is evolution evolving us. This is that information really informing each and every one of us as evolution itself. And so on every continent, in every country, there's beautiful, amazing initiatives emerging within us all. And so it's a place of time for hope, for excitement, and yet, like Jude said, choice. This is our time of choice. This is an important choice point. So I'm complete.
Maybe.
Right. Oh, go ahead, Martin.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe I could jump in. I was just, while you were talking, just thinking of this amazing quote of Dr. King. I think it's something like, those who love peace should learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. And I think that's also part of why these conferences are so important, that we, in ways, if there's a monetary side to organization, it's quite easy to organize around that. And I think to organize around love, we just have to find better ways to fight well, fight fire with fire, but also to use these beautiful communication skills and ways of community building in effective ways. Because I think we've all experienced this unity, and I think there are new ways coming as well, with the whole psychedelic revolutions, with all kinds of other revolutions that are currently happening, and it's just an exciting time. But we need to start preparing and organizing in effective ways as well. So to come off the mountain and out of our yoga schools and into the world, and not seeing it as a viewpoint from outside of society, saying towards society, you are not whole yet, or we are somewhere else. We have to do it from in society, because that journey was already in the 60s and 70s. I think we need to move into these corporations, into these organizations, instead of from the outside looking inward. So I'm very excited.
Right. So yeah, I feel like we've reached a tipping point, and the extremist thought, the polarization, the silos that we've created in society and in the social networks. I'm hoping that, we're reaching that tipping point. And for me, this imaginal cell and this chaos battling with the old way, battling with the new way, is the stage that we're in right now. I think one of the really basic questions is that everyone can ask themselves is, what is really making us happy as individuals and collectively? And fortunately, going back to the science part of it, neuroscience has shown us that actually we are happy when we are showing empathy and caring and taking care of other people. The right chemicals in our brain are being are taking place. So we have this choice every day. Are we going to help, or are we going to hurt ourselves and others and the planet? Getting control of our amygdala brain, part of our brain, so we're not just answering knee-jerk reactions. And everybody in this space right now, at this moment, the people listening and in the panel and all of the 15,000, we're all clearly interested in this topic. We all have the responsibility of helping the world push us over that tipping point. I've traveled a lot around the world, as many of us have, and seen many cultures, heard the languages, had a lot of conversations about spirituality with various people. And we just all have many things in common. We're all human beings that want the same thing. But of course, the most important one is love. And in the chat, there's been so much discussion about love. All we need is love, right? Used to shout that song out as a teenager, but it's so trite, but yet it is just so incredibly true and powerful. Our egos, though, often get in the way, or someone else's ego has convinced us that they're right and we should follow them, which is kind of what populism is about. So no, stay true to your own sense of love and commit to living it. Love is an infinite source from which we can all draw from. We all have access to it.
Thank you, Kym. That was beautiful. And I think there's a very good reason why the golden rule is so prevalent across all cultures. Treat others as you would wish to be treated. And of course, Reboot adds, and treat the planet and everyone as we would wish to be treated. Because it's a natural way of being within a whole worldview framework, within Julie's good of the whole, within all that all of us and so many others are doing. But I just wanted to, perhaps because I'm conscious of the time, very briefly complete with, again, Kym, something that you and Jane were involved with a few years ago, which was the Imaginal Cells book, and you've referred to Imaginal Cells. And for me, this is a time not of crisis, but a time of metamorphosis, a time of transformation that we're actually in. It isn't as what it might be. We're actually in this process, it seems to me, at the moment. When the pandemic began, we have been and were a caterpillar species, It seems to me that the COVID-19 has ushered us in to a chrysalis where the old ways of being have to dissolve because they are no longer able to sustain. And as the literal, as the body, as the structures of all the dysfunctional aspects of that caterpillar dissolve, it fights, but its fighting actually makes the emergent possibility of the butterfly stronger. And we talk about imaginal cells, but it seems also to me that we're actually moving beyond those cells and beyond clusters of those cells to begin to be the potential of the organelles of the emergent butterfly, the wings, the antenna, the eyes. And Humanity Rising couldn't have happened before the pandemic, as Jim said. World Unity Week couldn't have happened before we're into this metamorphosis process. And so for me, when we talk about how can this empower transformational change, I feel it already is. People around the world already are. The organelles of conscious evolution are linking up and lifting up. And I think it was as both Wendy and all of us are saying, I think all of us, not just us on this call and the recording, but all ultimately we need to choose to do is to show up and get out of the way, because the universe's evolutionary impulse is seeming to me to be flowing through us. So it's about attuning with, aligning with, and serving that for the good of all. And just as Kym, you said, leave our egos at the door. Just show up with all that we are to serve this incredible moment of potential transformation.
So Tim, just before we go on to the chat, can I give you the last word here?
Thank you. It's very hard to follow Jude, because that was a lovely summary, Jude. Thank you. A few words really is let the children play, really. Let the children, because here we are, and look at our ages. And the education system has been mentioned on the chats and so on, and that will take time to transform, and I hope it does soon. And let the children organise their own education, and their cells are here right now, perhaps, as was mentioned by Wendy, perhaps cleaner in some ways and pure in some ways. And let's get them. You know, I was with Greta Thunberg in Bristol a few months ago, and the power of teenagers coming together, self-organised, with the police saying you can't do that, it's out the way, and just children coming together, creating power and momentum. It's there really, and we just got to give that space. Now's the time for our children, not the future. Now is the time for the children, right now.
Thank you. So Emma, you have the impossible task of summarising such a rich chat discussion in an elegant, short way.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, I was just sort of playing with that myself, like, wow, how can I summarize this? So wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting also using the left and right brains to navigate what's happening here, because it's a felt thing very much that's coming through from everyone. What I was finding was a few little pieces of what people have been saying. Putting them together makes a really kind of, for me, sums these points up that everyone's been talking about. So we talk about new ways of being, and that it's not about one thing or one person at a time, but everything working and coming together simultaneously. And this being something very much that Jude talks about, of the diversity of unity, that it's not uniformity. So within that, self-awareness is very important, and love. And I have this piece here that Henry mentioned. It is the fire in the heart, the fire of transformation, and the inner knowing that there is a better way, and the willingness to stand up and act, even just with our presence, showing up. And let the children play was also for me. I don't know about anyone else, and I hope everyone else has been feeling so enlivened by this like I have, but let the children play has also been a big part. And yes, lots of interest and questions around education, and yes, children of all ages. So I think that sums it up a little bit in the chat, if a summary is possible. Thanks, Jane.
So just noticing another chat message, all you need is love. Thank you, Kym, for a reminder about that. And we're going to now move to the closing of this session, but not the closing of our conversation together. And I'm going to invite us into another moment's silence again, when with that fire in our hearts, we feel and we visualize the possibility for transformation from unified reality into a much better world for all and harmony with nature on this planet. It is absolutely possible. And moments of breakdown and chaos are also moments of breakthrough and new creation. So I'll go quiet just for a few moments. But above all, I just want to finish by thanking everybody who's participated in whatever way, be it by your silent presence, be it from your chat comments, be it by the energy you bring to listening to the recording, and of course to our great panelists and to Jude, who started us off with such a wise understanding. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Jude, you put together a splendid panel, and I think on day 41, we went into kind of the ethereal realms of a whole world view that can really transform the world as we know it. And I want to thank everybody for all that you've brought. I want to try in my own way to bring it together through a question that Bruce Schumann asked about halfway through our session today. He asked, is what we're talking about like a new religion? And I would like to suggest, Bruce, that yes. And I think this is a very important point to ponder as we take in the possibility of a holographic universe, the possibility of a fusion of ancient shamanic intuition about the unity of nature and humankind with the latest cosmological research, that our generation, as we go through this chrysalis, it's not only about a new kind of politics and a new kind of economics and a new kind of education and a new kind of healthcare and a new kind of culture. I think to the degree to which we take in that the deepest challenge of our generation is to birth a whole new spirituality. That's the degree to which we will develop the consciousness to move forward, bearing in mind Einstein that the consciousness that produced the problem can't solve it. And I want to dwell on this for just a moment because it's easy to miss. You know, we talk about climate change and we say we have got to leave the oil in the ground. We've got to stop any more drilling. We've got to stop the deforestation of the Amazon. And we have to move immediately and radically to renewables, clean technology, and biomimicry. But we think about that in terms of how we are going to organize the outside world. We don't think very often about what we need to do in terms of our religious heritage. almost every one of the major religions, East and West, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, the 6 great religions, were shaped by patriarchy, our body denying, nature denying, women denying. And all of them are organized around some kind of transcendence. Those religious traditions have been integral to producing the crisis of the present moment. So when we think about how we need to move forward, I think we have to just as radically leave our ancient axial religious traditions behind as we say, technically, we need to leave the oil in the ground. And one of the most interesting demographic facts about this emergence of what Paul Ray calls the cultural creatives, we are the first generation in history that has separated spirituality from religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you went 1,000 years ago in Europe, you were either a Christian or a Jew. And then there was the Muslims over there. Religion and spirituality were fused with very few exceptions. But today, the mass majority of people that are culturally creative are spiritually alive, but not doctrinally religious in a classic sense of that term. And I think that is one of the most positive signals in the world today, that the opportunity to begin to radically change our consciousness and begin to embrace a whole new spirituality that we own based on Gaia. When we had the dialogue a couple of days ago with Jean Houston, someone asked her the question, Jean, what archetype does the world now need to embrace? And she says, one, Gaia. We are Gaia. And a spirituality that you see described by Jude, you were just extraordinarily articulate in the way you described the emergence, in my view, of a whole new spirituality based on Gaia, based on unity, based on what we now as human beings need to embrace. So I don't want to negate the old religions because they contributed a lot despite the patriarchal and body and nature denying structures within which they took shape, particularly the mystical traditions. But our crisis is so radically real that for the first time, scientists are talking about the possibility of an extinction, not of other species, but of the human species, if we don't change our ways. So when we're talking about a whole world view, my friends, this isn't just like a suggestion that people should kind of ponder, but isn't really important. In my view, this discussion today is the shift we have to make to embrace a unitary cosmos within which we fit organically. As Plotinus said, the whole universe breathes together. All of us are holographic. All of us need to realign ourselves. The new Torah isn't a book. The new Torah is biomimicry. Those natural laws need to guide us now. And we need to move from a radical transcendentalist tradition to a radical immanentalist tradition where we really embrace the fact that we are children of this earth. And our spirituality needs to burst forth from that place. So I just want to thank everybody for a very profound conversation. And I wanted to underscore its importance by noting that a central challenge of our time is to birth a new spirituality. And I want to close with this image. We think that we are in the year 2020. For the Jews, it's the year 5,000 and something. For the Buddhists, it's 2,500. For the Muslim, it's the year 700. What if we begin to conceive of this time, not by a calendar inherited by the past, from the past, but as the year zero, when humanity embraced the moment of unity in the midst of a pandemic and said, we are recreating the world. We're starting afresh. We're certainly going to take the best of what was. But just imagine if all the calendars were reset to zero. And we embraced the earth and we embraced each other as one. That would be a shift of consciousness. That's the holographic universe. So anyway, everyone, thank you. I was a little long in my discourse here. I got a little wound up because I was so inspired by today. So I want to thank you. And tomorrow we're going to have a dialogue with someone that Jude knows very well, Elizabeth Sahtouris, who would have loved this conversation and is one of the great scientists and biologists who's really speaking this same language. So we're going to be having a dialogue with Elizabeth between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European time, because every day Humanity Rising will be convening a different scintillating conversation, particularly during this period of new mindsets for a new world. We've witnessed that today, my friends. And so I want to thank everybody for your participation. See you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. Much love to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jude. Brilliant panel. Brilliant panel. Whoa.
Aren't we the lucky ones, Jim, to hang out with these brilliant, wonderful, wholehearted, fabulous folks?